Starbucks is a very interesting company that everybody knows, obviously, but it was a great experience for me. Number of years back, they contacted me to do a single project, which eventually turned into four very interesting projects. I was privileged enough to work at the corporate headquarters near downtown Seattle. They took over the old Sears building, and interesting thing about that building is that they left the floors. They had parquet floors from Sears days. They left them exactly as they were. They left the staircase that goes kind of in the middle of the building because they used to bring up packages apparently for Sears, and then workers on roller skates would roll them from the staircase in the middle of the room, so to speak, to the outer areas. And so they left the whole parquet floor situation intact, and made it a really kind of homey and very interesting, very unique decor, but at the same time very inviting and excellent atmosphere, phenomenal people to work with. I thoroughly enjoyed it. So just to quickly kind of go through the presentation here for Starbucks. The first project I worked on had to do with their nightly deliveries. They hire a third-party company, trucking company, to deliver their pastries and milk and supplies at night when the stores are closed. And so, because we're talking about hundreds and hundreds of stores, obviously it's a major endeavor. And instead of paying per delivery, they're actually paying in terms of efficiency, how long it takes to do a delivery. So the idea is to try to make it as efficient as possible. And Starbucks is a real stickler for efficiencies. And so the initial process, the way it was set up, was that the driver would come from this company. They would open, turn off the alarm in the store, open the door, drive their cart with a bunch of boxes on it inside. Obviously, try to get to the room where the refrigerator is and where they need to leave all this stuff. And if they have any obstacles in between, then that slows them down. If they can't open the door because the alarm doesn't work right or the code is wrong, that slows them down. If the temperature of the refrigerator is wrong, it's a problem. So there's all these certain things that need to be done exactly right. And the way they did it was the guy would come in and he would wheel his little truck and put all the stuff there. And any problems he encounters, he would fill out a piece of paper. And that paper, then all these papers would end up being collected somehow from the from the company that delivers it. They actually had multiple companies. And then this information, these papers would get, I don't know if they faxed them or somehow they delivered them to Starbucks. And then, of course, in the morning, people come in, they have to sift through all these papers and try to see what the problems are, by which time it's already kind of late to even do anything about that, depending on the situation. So it was a very manual, very kind of not the most efficient way to do it. So when they hired us, we needed to come in and set up a system where they can track all of these entries in computer using some sort of database. In this particular case, they wanted to do it in Microsoft Office suite of products. So they would use Access as the backbone that would have all the information. The same information people fill out on paper will go into a data entry program, and then it would get accumulated and collected and tabulated. And then the results of it, there's going to be some logic in there for some of these red flags. And then there was a fairly sophisticated process to figure out who needs to be notified, kind of like alerts. And all these alerts would go out immediately as soon as data entry is done, because the system would automatically create these alerts on the fly. And then the reports that go out are actually done in Excel, because Starbucks totally lives on spreadsheets. It's their bread and butter inside the company. So the reports have to be generated as an Excel spreadsheet. And then using Outlook, these reports were sent to various people on local level, regional level, countrywide level, depending on the severity of the problem and who needed to take care of it. So it was a pretty sophisticated system, and PCS put it together for them. So it's tracked, the deliveries. It tabulated all the information to figure out whether any kind of red flags, and created these Excel reports, and then information was emailed using Outlook. So all of this was done in a Microsoft Office environment using VBA, which is Visual Basic for Applications, as a glue between them, and it worked pretty well. So they were able to get much more efficient having this information available and take care of problems much more rapidly because of the situation. The second project that we did for them was totally different. They import coffee from all over the world, and a lot of products that they get, not just coffee actually, they also do the the gifts, the mugs, all kinds of stuff. So all of this comes from other countries, and so they do a lot of fairly complex importing and exporting. And what was happening is a lot of times some of the products would get stuck at customs, and they wouldn't know which products got stuck at customs necessarily, and then they had a disconnect between the imports that are coming in and what they physically have on hand, or the export that is going out. Mostly it had to do with imports. So they wanted to be able to track imports and exports, and then be able to intelligently determine if some things were missing somewhere, then notify appropriate people, and then take care of these problems more proactively, and track things so they don't get missed, and contact potentially customs people in different countries and things like that. So similar to the first project, they wanted it done in Office, using Office suite of products, and reports had to be done in Excel again, and then they were emailed to different people depending on the situation from Outlook. And so that was also kind of a different type project. I mean, usually we work on projects that are not this kind of unique and interesting, but this was pretty interesting. The third project we did for them was had to do with DriveThru Tracking. They used, I think, either 3 or 4 companies, I can't remember for sure now, to buy these timers. And these timers were basically sensors that they would set up at several different points along the drive-through period. So when you pull up to Starbucks through using drive-through, there would be a sensor that would track where your car is when you're sitting in line waiting. And then there would be another sensor that would track when you get to the window and order. And then there would be another sensor that would track when you're actually leaving completely. And so there were several different time frames, periods that they wanted to track. And so they went to these companies, even though there were several different companies that provided these timers for them. And the timers, the companies provided the actual sensors, and then there would be a display inside the store so management can see. Today they had, so many cars, so many minutes were, on the average, were spent in waiting in line, so many seconds were spent in ordering, things like that. But it was only at that particular store. They wanted to be able to get these reports at the corporate level so they can look and they can see if they can improve some efficiency by changing some things. But when they went to talk to these companies about getting a global picture, the company said that it's not doable as far as they were concerned. So they approached PCS, Starbucks approached PCS, and without telling us that they talked to these companies and they said it's not doable, they asked us, can you put this together? They just basically told us that, we have these timers and this information is being fed, through, basically it's a SNMP port through serial ports, SNMP data, I should say. And then that information is stored in different formats because you got different companies involved and they all have their own formats. Can you put together something so we can, get all the reports from all these restaurants and then report on them on a global level? So you can look at, hundreds of stores and see what the averages are, efficiencies are, things like that. We took a look at it, and I didn't see any problems why we couldn't come up with something like that. So, plus, I don't like telling anybody who asks me to do something no, unless they absolutely have to. So we basically put together a system to consolidate all the information and centralize it all in a consistent format, basically. So we would read the data in all these different formats that the sensor manufacturers supplied, and then we would actually aggregate it and then set it up in a database on our end, which was online database, by the way. By this time we went into web-based territory, not using the Microsoft Access, and that mostly was because the data was accumulated, or not accumulated, but the data was supplied at these different locations. And without the internet, there would be no easy way to get to the data. So I might as well set up a web-based system based on that, which is what we did. So we put together a database, we put together a data entry, not data entry, but the data accumulation aggregation process. And then the data would flow into our database, and then we would simply do reporting on that based on whatever criteria they had, and then distribute it to various entities they wanted to distribute it. And that worked really well. Microsoft wasn't involved here. Starbucks was most pleased that we were able to determine exactly what to do and supply them with exactly what they wanted, even though other people told them it wasn't doable. So that was kind of cool. And that was a very interesting project, actually, and it worked pretty well. And then the last project we did for them was interesting because, again, completely different. The gentleman who founded their Clover line of coffee, which was the special kind of high-end coffee using special machines, the company that Starbucks bought, also Seattle-based, but it's interesting that the founder of Starbucks actually found them in Germany at a coffee show and bought the company after he saw what they're doing. And so if you go to some Starbucks, they have these Clover coffee machines, and the same gentleman who developed and designed that machine also designed this special device where they wanted to be able to track how much coffee is wasted by dumping in sinks, because they make coffee and then there's all this coffee that's kind of left over and it's all being dumped into the sink, and they couldn't tell exactly how much of the coffee is wasted. So the idea the guy came up with this device that you put in the sink itself, and when the coffee waste is poured into there, it tracks exactly how much is being poured out, and then it supplies that information to a some kind of device, whatever device you want. Initially, it was supplied to a tablet, but we modified it so the thing would go into our database, again, web-based database, and then tabulate information and send it to the right people. So it was kind of an interesting, cool project. Also, again, shows how much Starbucks cares about efficiencies and trying to do whatever they can to make things as efficient as possible. So those were the projects for Starbucks. Amazingly great experience for us. Certainly interesting, and at the same time extremely rewarding.